Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. And I'm delighted to be joined by Simon West Oliver, Sales and Business Development Director at Assetworks. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Kate. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again too. Simon, we have spoken before, but for the benefit of our audience today, could you just outline the services that Assetworks offers?
Yes, sure. So Assetworks are a global provider. We provide what we call a fleet ecosystem, but predominantly that's based on a software solution. And that solution is a cradle-to-grave fleet management product with a number of associated supporting solutions that we provide. So we've got about 640 clients globally, looking after about 14 million assets, everything from a bicycle to a piece of ancillary equipment, but predominantly it's commercial vehicles, LCVs, cars, and a complete mixture of different powertrains in there. So everything running on, traditional ICE type platforms right the way through to transitioning EV platforms.
Great. And when you say cradle to grave, can you give me a flavour of the kind of services within that?
Yeah, sure. So, our platform will, when I say cradle to grave, will manage things from the planning and acquiring of assets, the selection process of those assets, then the actual operational relationships between a driver, right the way through to managing workshops activities, so managing technicians, managing parts supply to those assets, to managing the contract side, so how the vehicle's actually managed on a contract. So it could be managing the lease of the vehicle, it could be managing the rental of the asset, and it could actually operate on a back-to-back basis. So it could be managing equipment from one supplier and then back-to-back supplying it out to another client, right the way through to the fueling process, accident management, the driver management, the whole lifetime activity that you would imagine to see around the operation of a fleet, right the way through to disposing of the asset at the very end. And then that's supported by an array of other platforms. So uniquely, we get into providing fuel infrastructure. So the traditional ICE fueling infrastructure, if you're managing bunkered fuel, but also we're now moving into providing EV infrastructure for our clients, managing how they manage the different power suppliers and the different charging supplies that they may require to fulfill their total fleet requirement. And then above all of that, we'll also manage any associated asset that you may use with your fleet, as well as one holistic view right across your organization. We then tie that into doing some unusual bits of management, like remote storage of assets where you have nobody there and you want to send somebody off to go and pick a vehicle. We'll manage all that. We have a very American sounding name for that, which we call Key Valet. And then on the other level, we also have a product which is completely agnostic of even our software, which we call Capital Asset Management, which allows an organization to literally plug in our CAM solution, as we abbreviate it. And that product will plug into any fleet system that's out there and help you rationalize your fleet acquisition, making sure you're getting the best types of assets for the right type of work that your business is actually managing.
That's great, Simon. I'm really getting a flavour here. So you've basically every problem and every challenge or every task that a fleet manager may have, you've sourced a solution for that, and you've bundled it all up into this one place. So they're not having to manage across multiple platforms and multiple providers.
And what is we go into organisations at different entry levels. So most of our clients are taking our core software, but we do get clients to come and say, okay, look, I've got a software product from another vendor, but I'm looking at fuel management. Okay, so they may look at what we're providing in that area. I mentioned what we do with CAM, but the idea is a fully integrated ecological platform around fleet, and there's a reason for that. One of our key drivers is to help organizations transition, help them operate a more sustainable fleet environment, okay, and ultimately get that carbon footprint down as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible.
Okay, great. So I suppose the obvious question is, what kind of fleets are using your solution? Is this for the really big fleets, or is it for a particular sector, or can anyone access it?
Right, so it's a good question. I mean, if you looked at our operation internationally, yes, we're looking after lots of very large global type fleet operations who they have some critical issues when you look at acquiring asset and you're managing those assets, especially now with this drive to sustainability and to operating very low carbon operations. But we have fleets, small local government operators. We have fleets from 150 upwards. I mean, our largest fleet in the UK is the Royal Mail, and they're operating today in excess of 54,000 assets across the whole of the country, and that is a unique. There are more smaller mid-sized fleets within our platform in the UK.
Great. Okay. So pretty much it's not exclusive by any means. Okay. Great. You mentioned when you were talking about some of the different services that you manage or you support fueling infrastructure. Yeah. I'm imagining that now that we are in a world where most fleets are mixed fuels, as opposed to the traditional, the answer's diesel. So how do you support that complexity? How do you go about supporting that?
Okay, so from a physical perspective, we actually provide the hardware that you'd actually put next to a bunkered fuel site. We also provide, and for organizations that are transitioning to EV, we'll actually work with EV charging partners, but we have an holistic solution for managing the different types of charges that you may require. But we do get involved in supporting organizations who are managing both at the moment and are transitioning from one to the other. Because one of the biggest issues they've got is that there's a level of asset that they've got at the moment that there isn't an EV solution for them today. And they're looking at they're unsure of where to go right now, but they know there's an element that they can transition to EV. So we help a smooth process of that. We align that with our CAM solution, and our CAM solution advises them really which assets they should be replacing now, which ones can be replaced over the next 6 months, and goes right the way out to that cutoff date that we're looking at. Okay, mapping their whole fleet replacement. At the same time, we're providing them an infrastructure platform behind that allows them to transition very, very effectively and reduce that ICE commitment. At the same time, bringing in their EV platforming and their EV infrastructure, because we all know it's not just about buying a load of electric vehicles. The minute you buy them, you've got this compulsion or compelling issue that you've got to put the infrastructure in to charge these things.
Yeah.
And some of that is remote. Okay, most organizations are doing a mix and match because not all organizations now are putting in their own sites. They're also looking at how they manage that infrastructure, because people have said, well, if I'm going to do this, there's got to be a way I've got not just to benefit our business's carbon reduction, but how do we manage this very expensive commodity, which is the electricity that goes into these vehicles. So, we're talking lots of organizations now again, how do I make my operation a smart operation? Okay, and that has an impact on them as well, because there is not just the cost, it's actually implementing that infrastructure and getting the best method of charging for how they operate as a business. Yeah. That offers some uniques, and again, that's something that we get very closely involved with all of our clients.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And when you're talking about the best charging solution, there's two metrics there, isn't there? There's the financial in terms of getting the best value, but there's also getting the greenest electricity as well. So it's a multifaceted challenge. So if you're advising fleets on which vehicles they should move across or transition across, presumably that's underpinned by some TCO analysis. But because you do this cradle to grave service, you're then able to measure that true cost of ownership, because there must be an element of when you're business casing what you think the cost of ownership will be, and then the reality of what the cost of ownership will be, and you get to see the whole picture.
Yeah, and again, this is where we use our CAM solution, and the capital asset management solution is designed for managing that whole life cost, total cost of ownership. And it's also, it has to have an element of agility, because to a certain extent, we are shooting into the dark on future residuals on certain types of assets. And when you talk to clients, that has been a big sway on how do I acquire vehicles? Am I far better at renting asset in to cover an element of my fleet today rather than acquiring it? There are other assets that they go, just because of the demand that we're going to potentially put those assets through, we're probably better acquiring them. Now, it could be a lesser demand or a greater demand, but the whole idea about CAM, it helps them map that acquisition process and disposal process. So they're actually getting rid of their ICE vehicles at critically the right time, that it's going to have the lowest financial impact on the business, but also has the largest ecological benefits to the business as well. It isn't black and white, the problem is, because we're also, the other thing we're going through now is there's a little bit of the unknown still out there. And there's a lot of change and agility that you need to manage through that process. What we like to do is give clients the tools to be able to manage that, because their thinking process 3 years ago around EVs has now changed. And their thinking process, without a doubt, in the next 2 years will change again. And the idea of putting CAM in as a solution allows organizations to map that change and cope with those changes that are starting to happen. So it gives them some agility, which is quite important. And this is why, you look at businesses going, okay, do I buy? Do I rent? Do I lease? Okay, what should I be doing now? And so we're now starting to see, if you look at the major leasing companies, they've all announced this week their EV leasing platforms have gone through the roof. Because organizations want to manage the best way, and they have no way at the moment of seeing really, we're just starting to see what RVs are going to look like for an EV at the end of a lease or a rental period.
This is a really interesting topic in general. And I talk to a lot of organizations who, let's say, historically have gone down the outright purchase route. And all of their operational processes and all their financial planning processes are underpinned by that. But they can see that actually leasing may be a better option, but they're finding it quite difficult to bring that operational and organizational change about. So if you had evidence-based analysis from your own system to show, why you needed it, would be a much more helpful conversation to have.
Well, without a doubt. And the idea is that we built up a level of expertise by working with a whole array of different types of fleets that will actually help organizations model based on similar types of businesses how they map that process.
That's quite crucial, isn't it? Because as you say, without sharing sensitive data, you have got a massive database of insight that you can socialize with your other clients.
Well, Kate, as you've often heard me say, the real power now is no longer oil, it's data. That is the real fuel for the future. And if you start to look at where the trends are going in the marketplace, it's hinging around data-driven decisions constantly in everything in our life. But around the fleet sector, data is all powerful now. And as we see some of the trends moving towards automation, autonomy, okay, the growth of AI, which we're seeing as trends now emerging into this sector, they're really going to change how we use assets, how we manage them, okay, and at the end of the day, our decisions will be based on data rather than, you know, the cost of maintenance and the cost of fueling these assets.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously we're seeing technology trends within the vehicles and the transport industry, but actually from an Assetworks point of view, there are other technology trends that you're able to bring into your business. So how do you keep pace with them? And, you know, what are the best examples of best practice, if you like, in terms of adopting these technology trends?
I think with any organization, they don't want to, they want to be leading edge. They don't want to be bleeding edge, if you know what I mean. They don't want to be embracing stuff when it's so early. So they look always for a level of stability. And we're now starting to see that there's certain assets now that are, you know, the driverless assets are starting to appear. They're being tested in difficult environments, which was always the concern when you look at the road infrastructures, that especially the road infrastructure we operate in the UK. You go to somewhere like Los Angeles, which is a very planned out grid system because it's a relatively new city. It's easier to map those types of assets in that type of environment. In the UK, it's a little bit more complex. You know, living in a remote village like I do, it's you suddenly realise how the hell is something that's autonomous going to manage with the potential things that are going to happen here. But it is starting to happen, and we need to realise it won't happen as a overnight. It will be a gradual process. So you look at what we've done with the introduction of smart motorways. You may not like the concept, but the idea is to make things safer. And so you have a level of health and safety compliance that I think is going to drive a lot of this. And we're starting to see that start to emerge. So you look at autonomous vehicles at one level, you know, you're never going to get complete autonomy because they still have to be mapped and managed remotely to a certain extent. And it's going to be a long time perhaps before we see total autonomous driving. But there are other things that are starting to impact. The assets, you know, sit in this whole concept of the Internet of Things. So the core asset, the fleet asset out there on the road, is getting cleverer. It's now saying, hey, there's something wrong with me. So you can now start to get into predictive maintenance.
Right.
So all of a sudden, this supports this whole concept of a circular economy, because I've got an asset that's out there. It knows when it's starting to have a failure issue. It's now notifying a system that's saying, I'm now going to take that asset off the road, but I now can plan its replacement. And I may, some of the things I can do remotely. And as AI evolves, you know, into our space, which it's starting to do now, the vehicle comes off the road. We get into the concept of AI inspections around assets, okay, that actually can make quantitative and quality decisions about what we do with that asset. But the whole process now is becoming very autonomous. That way, you can actually ultimately start to see the concept of assets coming onto our roads that are very much part of that circular economy. If I do have to take a component off it, that component can be regenerated into something else and pushed back into being a worthy piece of asset instead of a pile of trash in the corner of the workshop. So I think going forward, I think the three biggest trends we'll see in the next 4 to 5 years is the increase of autonomy, a high level of AI coming into our sector in certain areas. And I think the other area, which I've sort of skirted around, is that the huge reduction of paper from every environment. So if you look at now, we're already doing workshop systems where there is no paper at all. It's a complete paperless experience. Everything is digitized, you know, even to the notification back from an asset on the road saying it needs to come into the workshop. The system creates the job card. The job card is automatically playing on a I won't say iPad, but on a tablet or a mobile phone for the technician. The technician is managing his hours and his activity on that. The parts are being brought in in an automated way. Okay, so that has started to happen in perhaps the most unusual area, which was always thought of as being the dirty end of the business.
Yeah.
You know,
I do. I get it. And it's, I mean, actually, the benefit isn't being paperless. The benefit is that you now have digital access to so much more information immediately. So you can look back and say, well, hold on a minute, we seem to be having a lot of problems with this type of vehicle. You know, is there a weakness with, is there a fault with the vehicle? Or are we doing something wrong with the servicing? Or, you know, is there something else that we're missing here?
Oh yeah, the ramifications are absolutely enormous for making very well educated decisions, you know, and it's only going to improve the types of assets we start to appear on the road. And it also, that feedback of information back to the OEMs means that they can make core critical decisions based on market trend, performance of the asset in situ. Okay, and again, we've got to realize there is a commercial element to this. Okay, the OEMs want to sell assets.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to sell you another asset further down the line. But more importantly, they want to build a reputation of reliability. And if they embrace the concept of the circular economy, okay, they're actually getting involved in the disposal as from in a profitable way, but also in an ecological way as well.
And how nice as well that you, from your workshops, are almost definitely holding data that the OEMs would find valuable to help inform their product development and their R&D, because I think you said at the very beginning, we're seeing a lot of new vehicles on the road, less proven technology, less well established, and we need to kind of better understand how these vehicles are managing in the real world.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you look at most of the assets we see on the road, they weren't, you know, we think they're new. The development of them probably started 5 to 6 years ago.
Longer sometimes, yeah.
You know, and okay, what enables us is for us to make quicker decisions, decisions that are going to benefit us all, no matter where we sit in this environment. Because that always flags that, well, with all this level of autonomy, there's going to be less employment and stuff like that. Actually, there isn't, because this autonomy does create new opportunities. It creates new types of employment.
Yeah.
And going forward, I think, you know, that is going to have a huge impact on how we work, okay, with the types of assets that we've got, and the types of traditional roles may start to change into more digitized roles. Okay. And for me, I think it's really exciting times. You know, it's you look historically back on the pace of the change from horse-pulled vehicles to the ICE engine. You know, it's happening at a faster pace.
Yeah.
Transition now. But I've been in the market a long time, and I still find it very exciting what's happening right now, because I think the pace of change and the benefits that we're going to get from that pace of change are absolutely enormous.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I've seen it. I have not been in the industry as long as you, Simon, but I've definitely seen over the last 10 years this real acceleration. So my final question, which is a bit of a brain teaser for you, because you've kind of outlined this, the direction of travel and all of these really exciting things that are happening for fleets on the ground today. If you could recommend that there was one or two things that they should absolutely be doing to get themselves ready for this future world, what would they be?
I think there are two to three real answers to that question. I think perhaps the most important one is that look at how you work today, consider how your business is going to change, then base your fleet requirement on that change path.
Yeah.
Lots of organizations are going, this is what I'm doing today, I need to replace today. No, you don't. Well, there is a time period before you won't be able to acquire certain types of assets. Okay, but understand how your business is going to change first, based on the talks and relationships that you're having with your customers and your suppliers. and build your asset change around, okay, sustainability around your business as an entity, and the types of assets that you may need to evolve into over the next 3 to 4 years.
Simon, I think that's absolutely fantastic advice. You're not looking to swap out what you've got today. You've got to build a system that works for you in the future, which, as we know, is going to look very different. And the sooner it comes, the better.
Agreed.
So, Simon, that is about all we've got time for. As always, it has been a pleasure talking to you. And thank you to Assetworks for joining GreenFleet Talks. And of course, thank you to our audience for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.